Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In this lecture, we will discuss two significant contributors to the discussion on political economy of India, as well as about how do we understand the informal labor and the so-called informal sector in India. The reason being that, as we have discussed this week, almost 90% of India's workforce is informal, without contracts and protections. And more often than not, they have been regarded with a lot of scorn. They have been regarded as people who are marginalized. They have been regarded as people who have no voice of their own. And at the same time, they have been regarded as people who could be disposable, both in the urban locations as well as in rural areas and somewhere in between. In this lecture, we will explore how informal labor in India is also defined by power politics, it's defined by state politics, it's defined by political party politics, it's defined by class politics as well as organizational politics. So essentially, we'll look at how it defines, or how scholars have defined, informal labor in India as politics of work within a democracy. And keep this in mind, work and democracy. So, as I have been saying, informality in India, whether it is in the form of need economy, it is in the form of greed economy, in the form of informal sector, in the form of informality, in the form of informalization of labor, in the form of many other words that have been, or terms that have been assigned to them, is not a residual part of India's economy. Rather, we can actually consider this as the Indian economy, because if we consider workers as the main ingredients of any economy, that means any number of workers who are becoming part of a dominant majority should be identified as the major part of economy and not the residual. At the other side, these workers have income insecurity. They work in conditions which are most often than not regulated or by social concerns rather than by statist policies, rules and regulations. They are away from workforce related welfare, like many of the people who are part of formal economies. They get pension, they get medical benefits, they get housing benefits, they get accidental benefits, they get transportation benefits, so on and so forth. And all of them are not part of the life world of the informal economy. As several scholars have already addressed, caste, class and gender hierarchies shape or predominantly shape how work and access to work is identified and received. A very good example is Professor Barbara Harris White's book India Working, in which she is not only classifying workers in India in terms of caste, in terms of class, in terms of gender, but also in terms of region, in terms of your position in society, in terms of your status. So, informality, according to her, is of two characteristics. One, informality in a sense of informal or non-registered places of work, and second, informality in the shape of informal relationships. Now, she is also using something called social structures of accumulation, which is part of political economy, in which your status in society and the way your life world, your economy is structured around social factors create certain conditions in which you get work or you don't get work. You are recognized for your work or you are not recognized for your work. In the previous class, we had discussed about Maria Miss's example and study on Narsapur, on the lace makers of Narsapur. There also we witness caste as well as gender as predominant ways through which work is accessed and survival strategies are created. Who works where? How do they get that work? I'll give you an example. Just imagine something has happened in a place within a family, and this place and this family doesn't have an access to alternative kind of work. If they do not have access to alternative kind of work, so what will they do in that place itself? Will they move out of that place? Are they going to stay in that place, or they are going to starve themselves to death, or they are going to do something as a third option or a fourth option or a fifth option? What are the different plans they have? In case they decide that okay, there's nothing left in this village, let us move to an urban location. So in the urban location, the man will drive an auto rickshaw or a cycle rickshaw, and the woman will go and work in somebody's house. But when this person from a small village comes to a larger town, do you think they will be accepted as one of the fellow citizens there? The answer is no, they will not be, because nobody knows them here. And because nobody knows them here, so they will not be able to access any kind of work opportunities. The only way they can access is by knowing somebody who happens to be a middleman or middlewoman or somebody from their own respective villages. Through this middleman, you can go and search for different jobs or different works. As a matter of fact, even the beggars that you see in your streets in cities, they are also part of a particular network. They also have middlemen, and there is a possibility that there is not just one middleman, there are multiple middlemen in between before they land up where they are going to work. And for all of them, it is based on caste, it is based on gender, it is based on your linguistic affinity, as well as it is based on your ability to survival. If you are not able to do all this kind of work that they might demand from you, then your survival is at risk. So even for a very basic kind of work like begging in an urban location, you require this context. So that's the reason why informality goes much deeper than the way it has been understood in developmental literature, particularly in terms of policies. Political scientists, political sociologists, social anthropologists have often discussed the multiple layers through which we can understand informal economy, and through which we can also understand the relationship between informal economy, black economy, and different kinds of economies, and informality within formal economy and formality within informal economy. Therefore, we need to understand that if social structures are determining how some kind of work is accessed, that means social structures are also going to determine what kind of politics is being played out. And if we understand this politics, that means this politics could be visible as well as this politics could be invisible. And the moment we bring the visible part and invisible part together, that is when we understand the politics of the poor, or the politics of the working poor, or politics of the informal workers. So let us understand how two scholars have understood or have articulated the labor in India, or informal labor in India. First, we will discuss Rina Agarwala and her work Informal Labor, Formal Politics and Dignified Discontent. After that, we will discuss about the Breman and how he has looked at informal labor in rural and urban areas, and the migration between rural urban and urban rural in the context of Western India. So Agarwala has argued that informal workers are politically active and organized, right? This statement itself is quite radical. As I said, the moment somebody says informal workers, that means the implication of that, generally the others imply that they are not organized. If they are not organized, then they can remain as informal workers without any movement or mobility in their life. But what she argues is that they are both politically active and organized. Now, and she calls it as dignified discontent. Now let us unpack this. What is dignified discontent? What does politically active and organized means in this case? When we say dignified discontent, in the previous classes I have discussed that the informal labor doesn't have the power, doesn't have the authority to challenge their own employers. Why? Because they are always disposable, and many a times the work they get is in the form of piecemeal. That means if there are 5 products that they have to deliver within a given specific period of time, then only they will get paid. If even one order is not delivered on time, that means they'll get paid for only 4, not the 5th one. Also, piecemeal means that they get paid according to days. So every day in the morning from a labor chalk in any city, any town, small town, large town, big town or medium kind of town, a labor contractor would go approach there and pick up a few workers, and at the end of the day the work completes. So this is a scenario in which there is not much of leverage that these employees have, because they are not even employees, they are just labor who are out there to sell their labor. And as we had discussed with the need economy of Kalyan Sanyal, the capital doesn't even require their labor any longer because of higher levels of the autonomy as well as higher levels of the automation. Therefore, dignified discontent captures state, because as I said in the beginning of this class, India is a democratic country, and every person, whether they are in the informal sector, in the formal sector or in between, they are potential voters, and votes matter. And if votes matter, that means the voice of this informal labor also matters if they are organized. Hence, all the demands that this labor makes, it makes towards the state by asserting moral and political rights. It is the moral right of the state to provide the workers or provide the citizens their basic rights, basic right to life. And what constitutes of life? Life means having food, having water, having electricity, having a roof on their head. And this is how the moral and political assertion takes place. So when this takes place, there are 2 conditions that are there. The first condition is that the workers and the representative of these workers assume and accept that there is a moral responsibility of the state to provide for its citizens, like a welfare state. And the state is not going to do its duty unless and until it is forced to do. As we have been discussing throughout this course, it's only the elites who get what they get without much fuss in any kind of capitalist or non-capitalist economy or nation. So the ones who are considered to be marginalized and powerless, they have to form a community, and this community is going to assert itself and argue that we need this. And as a matter of fact, what we witness is that this has been quite characteristic all across the globe, particularly in the global south. So, what Rina Agarwala argues here is that we need to locate the citizenship based the issues rather than class based demands, because class consciousness is very difficult to achieve here. Not all of them are into regular jobs, not all of them are organized in the way trade unions had organized them before, and because they don't even know whether they are going to be in their place, including on the footpath the next morning. So we need to be very careful in the way we are looking at politics itself, we are looking at morality itself. So that is the reason why she argues that informal labor politics is central to Indian democracy and not its periphery or not its peripheral aspects. So she argues that we need to look at it as labor politics first, and second as mobilization is through citizenship claims and social welfare, and third and most important is that the state becomes the principal interlocutor replacing the employer. So interlocutor here is significant. It is significant because interlocutors are some people in between, and this also marks a difference in the way several Marxists try to understand how state functions, or that the state is a representative of the bourgeoisie. But the moment we are claiming that the state is also an interlocutor, that means you are giving an autonomous status to the state, and this autonomous state of the state has the role to protect the moral and political rights of its citizens. She gives examples of seva, something we had discussed in the last class, and other kind of the unions of domestic workers, of rag pickers, of daily wage workers, so on and so forth. So what this has done is that several welfare boards have been constituted by the states in the South India, in the western part of India, in the northern part of India, in the eastern as well as central part of India, but particularly in the southern part of India, where you have different welfare boards for different issues. Like in Tamil Nadu, what we witness is that there are different associations, and these associations are the most often than not not class based. They could be based on film star or movie star the fan clubs, sports fan clubs, or village the kind of committees. They could also be regarding similar other kind of community buildings, and construction of these communities make no class based arguments. So you have a fan club of let us say Mahendra Singh Dhoni, because Mahendra Singh Dhoni was the captain of the cricket team that hailed from Tamil Nadu. So they are not only going to argue for something to get in favor of the being supporters of Mahendra Singh Dhoni, rather being supporters of Mahendra Singh Dhoni means they are becoming part of a particular group, and through this group they can assert for their dignity. Similarly about food rights, similarly about education rights, there are certain welfare boards who look at how the migrant laborers children can get education even in the places where they have migrated, particularly in the case of tea estates, particularly in the cases of the coffee plantations, as well as in the cases of brick kiln workers, because both brick kiln workers, coffee estates as well as tea estates, their workers live within the estate itself, and because they are living within the estate itself, so they don't have access to many of the things that are that anybody who is staying outside of it is able to get. And most importantly, education. Second most importantly, subsidized food. And third most important is healthcare, because this area is controlled by certain groups or the employer, and getting access there itself is very difficult. That is the reason why dignified discontent is both a critique of existing scholarship as well as giving a lot of optimistic view of the state and its role in the way politics is shaped, in the way democracy is shaped. Jan Breman, on the other hand, looks at the same issue in the form of rural migrants who happen to be agricultural laborers and what he terms them as footloose labor. These are the footloose labor workers are the ones who get into circular migration. Circular migration means that one moment they will be in their village, next moment they will be in a particular city, and within that city they might move to different places, and then they'll again come back to their village. They might spend 3 months here, 3 months here, and then rest 6 months they would be working in their own villages. But nowhere they get enough remuneration to stay there as permanent workers. That is another reason he calls them footloose, because they don't have the base at any place. And his work highlights the structural exploitation in terms of caste, in terms of gender, in terms of location, and how this creates something like a debt bondage. Agriculture workers are mostly formed through debt bondage. They're given some amount of money, and that money quantifies through generations, and generation after generation somebody works there, or they get certain advances, and when they get advantage they have to work for a certain amount of time for a particular landlord, and when they work for this particular landlord they don't get enough remuneration from him or her to repay the entire debt. So this continues over and over again. So the workers agency lies not in demanding something from the state, rather having their caste and regional affiliations in the market conditions and migration circuits. So their work is not just to become politically active, rather it is about everyday survival and informal negotiations. These informal negotiations could be at an individual level, or this could be also at community level. So in an effect, Breman's work is regarding how do we understand structural changes that have shaped pre-independence India, that has shaped post-independence India, and that has shaped post-liberalization phase. So we need to understand the migration in terms of kinship and informal bargaining, and resistance in terms of micro level acts rather than large protests. So the Breman's critique is that reform cannot be fixed by doing piecemeal work. Rather, it has to be structural. If caste exploitation or caste discrimination is there, then structural transformation needs to be done. If kinship relationship are there, then structural transformation needs to be done. Otherwise, just piecemeal approaches of giving some subsidies here, some subsidies there will not work. So in a nutshell, this is how we can also look at a comparison between Agarwala and Breman in where they converge and where they diverge. So Agarwala's work has been very crucial in our understanding in political sociology itself. In the way we look at the informal labor, we look at labor itself, and political economy is about Breman's work. So what he's done is that he's done several decades of the very minutely detailed field work in order to come to his conclusions. So finally, in terms of policies, we can say that Agarwala's intervention or suggestions usually lead to strengthening of welfare boards, legal recognition of certain kind of works, and participatory policy making. Whereas for Breman, it is about tackling caste exclusion, landlessness, and precarity, because for him, landlessness is very significant. Most of his work is with the Dalit laborers who were traditionally not allowed to own lands, and what was the relationship with their upper caste, the Maliks, and how they have tackled it over the past 45-50 years or so. So we also need to understand the bridges between formal and informal sectors, because as I said before, Breman was one of the first scholars who completely refuted this binary of formal and informal, because his argument is that there is nothing called formal and informal. Rather, we need to look at the hybridized organizing models or hybridized models of formality and informality. Otherwise, we can never understand the Dalit perspectives or feminist perspectives of what women endure, what Dalit men and women endure in informal sectors. So, as a conclusion, we can argue that informal sector is not without its politics, but most often than not, its politics is based on morality, its politics is based on a hope that the state is going to give them something if the informal laborers, informal workers can organize themselves, because they are part of a democracy, so they can achieve a decent life and not starve themselves to death. So these are following questions that we can discuss later on and you can go through, and some of them are further readings for yourself. Thank you.